Welcome to the podcast, David Foote. You are an ESL teacher and project manager. It's good to have you on the platform.
And thanks for having me. It's been, I think, 22 years the last time I saw you in primary school after graduation, and another 14 years after my second year at UE, I think. So
Yes,
it's been a while. Thanks for having me.
definitely. No problem. Tell us, what does it mean to be an ESL teacher?
All right. So ESL stands for English as a Second Language. And an ESL teacher is a teacher that's teaching English to foreigners. So this is someone who has to teach a little bit differently. There's a difference between teaching English to people who already know English versus teaching English to someone else who speaks a different language, has a different culture, different way of life, everything. So the skill set is also different. There's a heaviness on how to communicate, or a need for you to have the skills in how to communicate with someone from a different background. So that's it.
Yes, that's pretty much interesting. I don't think you find a lot of ESL teachers in Jamaica. To my knowledge, I
Mhm.
highly doubt that.
It's an industry that's very hard to get in. It's very
Mhm.
hard to get in. So those who had a chance to get there, yeah, it's a blessing, but it's very few.
But question, what had intrigued you to become a ESL teacher though?
Uh, you mean outside of looking for a job?
Yes. Yes.
All right. I always loved language. My background as a Jamaican is very mixed, and it's not a background that's remote, meaning it's not your great grandparents that you grew up hearing about. It's
Right.
my immediate it's my immediate grandparents and their parents who I did get a chance to grow up with. Um, these are people who are pretty much Europeans in terms of the languages that they speak, where they're from. So we're speaking about Germany, we're speaking about England, we're speaking about Spain, and of course, our background as Africans, we're of West African origin.
Right.
But the immediate people that I grew up knowing are Europeans, more or less, and their children were born in Jamaica.
Mm,
Right. So
interesting.
because of that, I've developed that lightness and that desire to want to communicate and connect with these people. So my grandmother, who I've had for 21 years, meaning age 0 to 21,
Yeah.
she is Jamaican born, but she's born to foreign parents. Her father is from Honduras, so automatically she speaks Spanish, and me being able to have her, I was able to learn a bit of Spanish from her because of that. Um, my father is an example. Some of his pronunciations, though he and his parents are Jamaicans, some of his pronunciations have German pronunciations. If he speaks, you cannot say that he's not Jamaican, but when he speaks, you can hear some of the German vernacular in what he's saying sometimes. So some of his V's, like the letter V as in Victor, sounds like
Yeah.
F, sounds like an F,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So in German, the V is pronounced as an F, and that's just a small example.
Interesting. You spoke about various cultural backgrounds. How
Mhm.
does language shape culture?
All right. So concerning that, we first have to define what language and culture is separately, then we'll easily be able to understand the differences and how they shape each other, how they affect each other. So language is verbal, written, and nonverbal signs used to communicate between two or more people, while culture can be defined, in my opinion, as a way of life that can be exemplified in how we speak a language, how we prepare food, what we eat, our way of entertainment, music, dance, all the arts we can think of, and anything that can be categorized regionally or specific that identifies as a country or people group. So, based on those definitions, we can clearly assume that culture more than likely shapes language or affects language rather than language affects culture.
Right.
Language doesn't necessarily have any effect on culture. However, in a smaller sense or comparison, um, based on my observation, language will tend to affect culture if that language is attached to a specific culture that tends to be widely accepted or a preferred way of speech by a nation or country that speaks a different language and has a different culture. So we know that in the Caribbean, most of us, or yeah, most of us, or half of us in the Caribbean were British colonies. But because we're in so much of a close proximity to the United States,
Right.
we and yeah, we tend to take on their side. They're closer. They have control over media. Um, they have they have control over a lot of things where influence is concerned. So that's just a small, minute example. Again, because that language is tied to a different culture, it affects or shape the culture of someone else if it tends to cause cultural erasure or replacement. And that would happen if it is the more popular way of speech in a particular region, which that
Right.
would be affected by who has more media coverage, media control, as said before, who has more entertainment content and attraction offered to local and international audiences consistently being advertised or shared, and of course, who has the higher or highest population, military, and political control or influence. So these things is what would call or what would cause language to have some form of effect in a culture and vice versa.
Okay. Do cultural differences impact communication?
Cultural differences impact communication. I would say yes. I'd say yes. The reason is this. Some people say tomato, some people say tomato. If you're aware of that difference, then you would respect that difference by communicating the way that they prefer in some sense. Say, for example, the word bulla. Bulla in Jamaica is a type of pastry that we eat in Jamaica. But the word
Yes.
bulla in Trinidad, even though we both speak English as a first language, bulla in Trinidad is known as a homosexual term, right? So
Right.
you can't go to Trinidad and just because you want bulla, the pastry, you walk into a store and say, "Give me a piece of bulla or give me one bulla." No, 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 no. You're gonna be thrown out the store. I would say we don't sell bulla here. And then if
Yes.
someone's that nice, they'll come to you and say, where are you from? So I'm from Jamaica. Um, so do you know what Bula means? And then, you'd spark that conversation. So this is why we have the term that says, when in Rome, we do as the Romans do. Because
Correct.
what might be respectful to you or simple to you is disrespectful and not so simple to someone else. So
Mm-hmm.
that's it.
Definitely, definitely. What role does language play in identity?
The rule is that language allows people to identify where you're from. That's the rule.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure, for sure.
And it also plays the role of how others engage with you and how you engage with others, which relates to the same reason about disrespect. Something that's okay in your language and culture may not be okay in another language or another culture of someone else. The same thing applies.
True.
It plays the role of navigating communication between two
Right.
or more peoples, right? Diplomatically.
True. What advice would you give to someone who is just starting to learn English?
Hmm. The advice that I'll give is to learn the standard form of the language. And this goes for any language, whether you're learning Spanish, Japanese, everything. Um, Learn the standard form of the language first. And while going through that, try to communicate with language groups over Zoom, over any social media platform. Speak with individuals in that language group that are bilingual because you're still learning the language, right? So you would need to communicate or build a relationship with somebody who more or less speaks your language and theirs, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So you would need, I'd say, speak to someone and develop a relationship with someone who's bilingual. They speak your language as well as the language that you want to learn. I'd say go on social media, go on video websites like YouTube to attend classes as well as a live class meaning face to face. Try and seek going to bilingual events. For example, in the Spanish diaspora or learning Spanish, they tend to have a lot of dance and bilingual music and dance events where people speak
Okay.
both Spanish and English, and you're able to converse in case you don't know how to say something and you really want to communicate with someone. If you say it in your own language, they will understand automatically. And then once you have passed that stage where you've learned the basics of the language and even not even just basic. Let's say that you're an advanced speaker of the standard form. You can now go ahead to go into dialects because there's a standard form, but every country and region speaks a different dialect of a language. So I'd
Right.
say learn, this is where culture comes in. Learn the culture of that particular country or that particular region, which with that culture comes with a type of dialect or accent. So because I have a friend from the Dominican Republic, my accent for Spanish is more or less Dominican slash Puerto Rican because it's almost the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, versus Mexico, totally different Spanish. Their Spanish is mixed with Aztec, the Aztec Indian population. So just like with Jamaican English, where we have certain words in Patois, right?
Right. Yeah.
They have in Mexico certain words in Aztec that belongs to the Aztec people language. So overall, um, communication in language groups is where it's at.
Which is
Bilingual language groups.
bilingual. That's very important because I realize I emphasize a lot on bilingual, not just
Right,
finding groups that just
right.
speak
Because
English.
yes, because if you're a foreigner who doesn't speak English and you're learning English and you make mistakes or you just want to ask what does X or Y mean, then you're going to need that person to tell you in your language what does X and Y mean or how to say.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. And that's some sound advice. But how can someone overcome their fear of speaking in a new language?
Well, you overcome the fear. This is for almost anything regarding to fear. It's to face it head on. So to overcome that fear of learning the language is to plunge yourself in, right? As said before, I think I mentioned it to you before about abrasion,
Right.
where abrasion has to do with somewhat being uncomfortable or somewhat being scolded or corrected. Be open. So be open to correction, be open to make mistakes, face the fear of being wrong. Don't be afraid of being wrong. Just face that fear. If you're wrong, be wrong and strong. But even with that, I would say be wrong but humble, right?
Yes.
Um, because even though even though it is correct to say that you need to face that fear head on, there might be some abrasive situations that will become too abrasive. Sometimes that abrasion, depending on where you are, can lead to death because you might
Ouch.
say something at the wrong place to the wrong
Wrong
people at
time.
the wrong time, and something happens to you because you didn't know the rules, right? I remember
Hmm.
this scene in John Wick movie, in one of John Wick movies. This French guy says there are rules to be followed, Mr. V. There are rules to be followed. If you don't know the rules for the area and you communicate a particular way, as Jamaicans say, you get what the duck get,
Yup.
right? So
Yes.
there is that portion. But as long as something doesn't kill you, it makes you stronger. So just face the fear head on, and then you overcome that fear by learning, right? Because the mistakes that you will make will cause you to become a sharper person when you're communicating. You can say, okay, I won't do this again, but this is what I should do. Um, there's this other thing regarding the fear. It's good when you don't face fear alone, right? So I said
Yes.
before, develop a relationship with somebody who is bilingual. Very important. That person would more than likely explain the rules to you so that you can step in confidently. Because there's a difference between going in something alone where you have the fear
Right.
and going into something with someone else who has your back. You will still have the fear, but you will be more confident and you
True.
will be more knowledgeable of the rules and regulations of engagement, rules of engagement, right?
Right.
So that's how I'd say you'd overcome the fear. Just face it head on, be open to correction, be open to making the mistakes, and don't go into that space alone. Develop a relationship with someone who's bilingual.
Pretty good insights and encouragement. I think a lot of persons will find that pretty much useful. So it's a pleasure having you here, just sharing more in depth about what's it surrounds.